Picture this. Two police cruisers sitting in a quiet suburban driveway, neighbors creeping out of their houses like prairie dogs sensing drama, and there's Karen, we'll call her Brenda, standing there in her yoga pants in righteous fury, screaming about criminals who refuse to pay their legal fees. My wife Melody stands in our doorway, arms crossed, not budging an inch. I'm walking out of the garage, still covered in sawdust from my morning project, wondering what fresh hell our HOA has cooked up this time. Brenda's jabbing her finger at the officer. "Arrest them! They're stealing from the community!" The cop starts walking toward me, all business. Then he freezes mid-stride. His eyes go wide. Suddenly, he snaps to perfect military attention and says the 5 words that changed everything. "Yes, General, how can I help?" You should have seen Brenda's face drop. What would you do if your HOA tried to extort $500 from your family for absolutely nothing? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers worldwide. Let me back up and tell you how we got to that moment. My name's Rex Hartwell, and 18 months ago, my wife Melody and I thought we'd found paradise. After 28 years in the Army retiring as a brigadier general, I was ready for the quiet life. Melody had put in her time too, teaching elementary school for over 2 decades. We'd earned our peace. Willowbrook Estates looked perfect on paper. Manicured lawns, tree-lined streets, that whole suburban dream package. The smell of fresh mulch and the sound of sprinklers running at dawn, it felt like civilian heaven after years of military bases and deployment stress. But every paradise has its snake, and ours went by Brenda Kensington. Picture the most stereotypical HOA Karen you can imagine, then multiply her by 10. Brenda lived in the biggest house on the block, inherited money, never worked a real job in her life. She drove a white Lexus SUV that she parked like she owned the entire street. Always in those expensive yoga pants that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager," with a haircut that cost more than most people's car payments. But here's what really got under my skin. Brenda had a type. She loved targeting military families and anyone who worked with their hands. Teachers, construction workers, mechanics, basically anyone who didn't fit her country club vision of suburban perfection. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks after we moved in. I'd spent my Saturday morning building a vegetable garden in our backyard, completely within property lines, mind you. The rich soil felt good between my fingers after years of handling nothing but paperwork and command briefings. I had tomatoes, peppers, some herbs. Melody joked that I was finally growing something instead of just barking orders at young soldiers. Then Brenda came storming across our yard like she owned the place. "This is completely unacceptable," she announced, her heels clicking against our concrete patio. "Agricultural displays violate our community's aesthetic standards." I wiped my hands on a towel, staying calm. "Ma'am, I checked the HOA documents before I started. There's nothing in there about gardens." "Section 12.3.7, she snapped, "maintaining property values. That eyesore is bringing down the neighborhood." Now, I'd read every page of those HOA documents. Military training makes you thorough about regulations. There was no Section 12.3.7 about gardens. But Brenda wasn't interested in facts. "You have 10 days to remove it and pay the $500 compliance fee," she said, pulling out some official-looking papers. "Or we'll take legal action." $500 for growing tomatoes on my own property. That night, Melody found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., reading through every HOA document again with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The steam had long since stopped rising, and I could hear the hum of our refrigerator in the quiet house. "She's done this before, hasn't she?" Melody said, settling beside me with her own mug. I showed her what I'd found. 3 other families on our street had received similar compliance fees in the past year. The Johnsons, he's a retired Navy mechanic. The Garcias, she teaches middle school. The Patels, he drives a delivery truck. All working-class folks, all people who'd earned their place in this neighborhood through sweat and sacrifice. "It's a shakedown," I told Melody. "Pure and simple." But here's the thing about military training. It teaches you patience. It teaches you to gather intelligence before you strike. And it teaches you that bullies only understand one language: overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Brenda Kensington had no idea who she was messing with. She saw a retiree with dirt under his fingernails and thought she'd found an easy target. She was about to learn why picking fights with old soldiers is a really, really bad idea. 3 days later, Brenda made her first big mistake. She went official. A certified mail truck rumbled down our quiet street that Tuesday morning, breaking the suburban peace with its diesel engine growl. The mailman handed me a thick envelope with all the ceremony of delivering a death warrant. Inside was the most ridiculous thing I'd seen since a lieutenant once tried to court-martial a soldier for having aggressive shoelaces. Brenda had created something called the Architectural Review Committee and appointed herself chairwoman. The letterhead looked professional, expensive paper stock, embossed logo, the whole 9 yards. "Dear Mr. Hartwell," it began, "your unauthorized agricultural installation violates Section 12.3.7 of our community guidelines regarding property value maintenance. The Architectural Review Committee has assessed a compliance fee of $500, payable within 10 days, to avoid legal action." But here's where it got interesting. She'd CC'd the entire neighborhood. Every single house on our street got a copy of this letter, like she was putting me in some kind of suburban stockade. That was her second mistake. See, in the military we have a saying, never give your enemy intelligence about your own operations. Brenda just showed everyone exactly how her scam worked. I spent the next 2 days doing what any good intelligence officer does. I gathered intel. Turns out this Architectural Review Committee was about as official as a $3 bill. I pulled out my reading glasses and went through every HOA document with the same thoroughness I used to review battle plans. The smell of fresh coffee filled my kitchen as I worked late into the night, cross-referencing bylaws and meeting minutes. Here's what I found. According to our HOA charter, any new committee requires a majority vote of the board of directors, recorded in official meeting minutes. I requested all board meeting minutes for the past 2 years, which, by the way, is your legal right under state sunshine laws in most places. Knowledge nugget number 1. HOA members can request all board meeting minutes under state sunshine laws. They have to provide them within 30 days or face legal penalties. Always demand written proof of board authorization for any fees or committees. Guess what? No vote, no committee, no legal authority whatsoever. But Brenda wasn't done playing her hand. She'd made a third mistake. She'd used the same playbook on other families. I started knocking on doors, and the pattern emerged like a battle map. The Johnsons had paid $300 for unauthorized vehicle storage because Mike parked his work van in his own driveway. The Garcias got hit for $400 over Maria's culturally inappropriate holiday decorations. Apparently, Papel Picado was too ethnic for Brenda's taste. The Patels coughed up $250 because their teenage son practiced drums after 4 p.m. on weekdays. Every target had 3 things in common: working-class background, non-traditional lifestyle, and the kind of people who kept their heads down and paid up rather than fight. "She's running a protection racket," I told Melody over dinner that Friday. "Like the mob, but with yoga pants and a Homeowners Association." Melody set down her fork, a sure sign she was shifting into teacher mode. "So what's our counterattack, General?" I pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. "We're going to give Ms. Kensington a lesson in what happens when you mess with people who actually read the fine print." The next morning, I hand-delivered my response to Brenda's fancy letter. No certified mail, no drama. Just a simple envelope slipped under her door while she was at her Saturday morning yoga class. My letter was 1 page, typed on plain paper. "Dear Ms. Kensington, thank you for your letter regarding the non-existent Section 12.3.7 and your fictional Architectural Review Committee. I've reviewed all HOA board meeting minutes and found no record of this committee's formation or your appointment as chairwoman. Additionally, state law requires 60 days notice for any new fee assessments, a requirement your letter fails to meet. I've attached copies of the relevant statutes and board meeting minutes for your review. I look forward to your response. Respectfully, Rex Hartwell, property owner." The beauty of military communication is its precision. No wasted words, no emotion, just facts delivered like artillery shells. Brenda's response came 2 hours later. She stormed across our yard like an angry rhinoceros, waving my letter in the air. "You can't intimidate me with your military lawyer tricks," she screamed, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. I was in the garden, checking on my tomatoes. The plants were recovering nicely from her son's midnight vandalism attempt. Oh, did I forget to mention I'd caught him on my new security camera? "Ma'am," I said, not looking up from my plants. "I'm not trying to intimidate anyone. I'm just following the rules. You know, those things you claim to care about." "Rules are rules, Mr. Hartwell. This isn't the military." I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt off my hands. "You're absolutely right, ma'am. In the military, we actually follow our own regulations. Brenda didn't take my little civics lesson well. Within a week, she escalated from neighborhood crazy to full-blown legal terrorist. The thick envelope that arrived the following Thursday had the weight of expensive trouble. Real law firm letterhead, embossed seal, the kind of paper that whispers, "This is going to cost you money." The return address read, Thornfield and Associates, Attorneys at Law. I opened it at my kitchen table while Melody graded spelling tests beside me. The smell of her red ink pen mixed with my morning coffee as I read the most ridiculous legal threat I'd encountered since a supply sergeant once tried to sue the Army for emotional distress caused by inventory discrepancies. Mr. Hartwell, the letter began, our client, Ms. Brenda Kensington, has retained our services regarding your continued violation of community standards. Your vegetable garden creates health hazards, attracts vermin, and constitutes a public nuisance. Cease and desist all agricultural activities immediately or face a lien against your property for unpaid compliance fees. Melody looked up from her papers. Health hazards? What are they claiming, that tomatoes are biological weapons? Gets better, I said, reading on. They're threatening to place a lien on our house if we don't pay the $500 within 72 hours. But here's where Brenda made her biggest mistake yet. She also scheduled something called a community concern meeting for the following Saturday, sending flyers to every house. The flyer's headline read, Protecting Our Neighborhood from Problem Residents. That night, I made 2 phone calls. First call went to my old JAG buddy, Colonel Sarah Martinez-Well. She's retired now too, working as a civilian attorney. When I explained the situation, her laugh could have woken up soldiers 3 barracks over. Rex, this is beautiful, she said. They can't place a lien without following specific legal procedures, county filing, proper notification, actual legal basis. This attorney is either incompetent or betting you won't call his bluff. She walked me through the real process. Property liens require court orders for disputed debts, official county filings, and about 6 months of legal procedure. You can't just slap a lien on someone's house because they won't pay your made-up fees. Knowledge nugget number 2. HOAs cannot place liens without court approval for disputed debts and must follow state-mandated legal processes, including county filing and proper notification. Invalid lien threats can result in penalties against the filer. Second call went to my neighbor Mike Johnson, the Navy mechanic who'd paid Brenda's bogus vehicle fee. Turns out, Mike had been quietly talking to other victims too. We should meet, Mike said. Maria Garcia wants to talk, and I think the Patels are ready to fight back. Sunday evening, 6 families gathered in my living room. Melody had made coffee and her famous chocolate chip cookies, the smell filling our house with warmth that contrasted sharply with the anger in the room. Mike brought copies of his payment to Brenda. Maria had photos of her holiday decorations that got her fined. The Patels showed up with a teenager who looked embarrassed that his drumming had cost his parents money. 2 other families I hadn't known about, the Hendersons and the Kowalskis, shared similar stories. She's collected over $4,000 from just our street, Maria said, her teacher instincts kicking in as she totaled up the damages. And I bet she's hitting other streets too. That's when we made our discovery. Jenny Henderson, who works at the county clerk's office, had brought something interesting. I looked up the HOA's financial filings, she said, spreading papers across my coffee table. Brenda owes $3,200 in unpaid HOA assessments herself. She hasn't paid her own dues in 18 months. The room went dead silent. Then Mike started laughing, that bitter laugh you hear from soldiers who've just realized their commanding officer is dumber than they thought. She's been stealing from us to pay her own bills, he said. We formed what Melody dubbed the Willowbrook Truth Squad that night, 6 families, a group text chain, and a coordinated plan to document everything Brenda had done. But Brenda wasn't finished with her legal theater. 2 days later, another letter arrived, this time from the attorney threatening criminal charges for harassment and stalking because I'd knocked on doors asking questions. The letter claimed I was organizing a conspiracy to intimidate a law-abiding citizen and warned that continued aggressive behavior would result in restraining orders and criminal prosecution. I showed the letter to Melody over dinner. She was eating lettuce from my supposedly illegal garden, and the irony wasn't lost on either of us. They're scared, she said simply. People don't threaten lawyers unless they know they're losing. That night, I started planning our counteroffensive. In the military, we have a principle. When the enemy shows you their desperation, that's when you press the attack. Brenda had just shown us exactly how desperate she was. I woke up Tuesday morning to find my tomato plants destroyed. Not damaged, destroyed. Someone had taken garden shears and chopped every plant down to the roots, then stomped on the remains for good measure. The rich soil I'd worked so carefully was scattered across the patio like a crime scene. The smell of fresh earth mixed with crushed tomato plants hit me like a punch to the gut. 28 years of military service, and I'd never felt this level of personal violation. Melody found me standing in the wreckage, coffee mug in hand, staring at what used to be my retirement hobby. "The security cameras?" she asked quietly. "Mysteriously malfunctioned," I said, pointing to the 2 units I'd installed after catching Brenda's son on the first attempt. Both were spray-painted black. Happened sometime between 2 and 4 a.m. But here's the thing about old soldiers: we learn from our mistakes. Those visible cameras were decoys. The real surveillance system was hidden in places only someone with military training would think to look. I pulled out my phone and opened the app connected to my actual security setup. Want to see who destroyed our garden? The footage was crystal clear. Brenda's teenage son, Tyler, creeping across our yard at 2:47 a.m., garden shears in hand, going to town on my vegetables like he was attacking enemy positions. But the real prize came at 3:15 a.m., when Brenda herself appeared, directing him to stomp on the remains and spray paint the visible cameras. "Got you," I muttered, downloading the video files to 3 separate devices. That afternoon, I made copies and hand-delivered them to every house on our street. No explanation needed. The footage spoke for itself. By evening, my phone was buzzing with text messages from the Truth Squad and half the neighborhood. The sound of multiple notifications chiming became the soundtrack to Brenda's downfall, but destruction of property was just Brenda's warm-up act. Thursday morning brought her masterpiece of petty tyranny, a noise complaint filed with the city, claiming my unlicensed construction business was violating residential zoning laws. See, I'd been doing some handyman work for neighbors, fixing Mike's deck, helping Maria repair her fence, installing a new front door for the Patels. Just being neighborly, maybe taking a few bucks for materials, nothing commercial, nothing that required permits. Brenda had somehow convinced a city inspector that I was running an illegal business from my house. Inspector Williams showed up Friday morning while I was helping old Mrs. Olivia fix her kitchen sink. He was a decent guy, probably in his 50s, with the tired look of someone who deals with petty complaints all day. "Got a report about unlicensed contracting," he said, showing me the paperwork. "Someone claims you're operating a business without proper permits." I invited him in, offered him coffee, and showed him exactly what I'd been doing. A few small favor jobs, no advertising, no contracts, no regular business operations. The tools were my own, the work was basic maintenance, and I wasn't charging for labor, just materials and beer money. "This is ridiculous," Inspector Williams said after reviewing everything. "Helping neighbors isn't a business. Whoever filed this complaint is wasting city resources." That's when I showed him the security footage of my destroyed garden. "Same person who filed the complaint?" he asked. "Same person." Williams shook his head. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. Never seen someone file false reports to harass neighbors. You want some advice? Document everything. This lady's going to escalate until she does something really stupid." Knowledge nugget number 3. Video surveillance on your own property is legal in all 50 states, and evidence of property destruction can support both criminal charges and civil lawsuits. Document everything with timestamps and multiple backup copies. Williams was right about the escalation. That weekend, Brenda launched her final desperate gambit, a whisper campaign designed to destroy my reputation. She started telling neighbors I was unstable, a dangerous veteran with anger management issues. She claimed I'd threatened her physically during our garden confrontation. She even suggested that my helping other neighbors was part of some kind of intimidation scheme. The accusations were as subtle as a hand grenade. She'd corner people at the mailbox, catch them getting groceries from their cars, show up at kids' birthday parties with her poison. "I'm just concerned for everyone's safety," she'd say, voice dripping with fake worry. "You know how some of these military types can be. All that violence they've seen." But Brenda had made one critical error. She was spreading lies about a man whose neighbors had actually gotten to know over 18 months. Mike Johnson shut her down first. "Lady, Rex fixed my deck for the cost of lumber and helped my kid with his homework. You destroyed his garden. Who's the dangerous one here?" Maria Garcia was even more direct. "Brenda, you've been harassing families on this street since we moved in. Rex is the first person who stood up to you." By Sunday evening, the neighborhood had chosen sides, and Brenda's side was looking pretty lonely. That night, I called an emergency truth squad meeting. 6 families had grown to 12. The living room was packed, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the tension of people who'd finally decided to fight back. "She's desperate," I told the group. "Desperate people make mistakes, and when she makes her next mistake, we're going to be ready." Sunday night, while Melody was grading papers and I was reviewing security footage for the dozenth time, I decided to dig deeper into something that had been bothering me. If Brenda was collecting all these compliance fees, where was the money going? I spread out every HOA document I could find across our dining room table: financial reports, board meeting minutes, treasurer statements. The paper rustled under my hands as I cross-referenced dates and dollar amounts, looking for patterns the way I used to analyze enemy intelligence reports. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 2 years, Brenda had collected approximately $23,000 in various compliance fees from families across our development. Architectural violations, noise complaints, vehicle infractions, holiday decoration penalties. She'd been busy. But here's the kicker. Not one penny had been deposited into the official HOA General Fund. I pulled out my calculator and started adding up the treasurer's reports. According to HOA President Bob Kowalski's financial statements, the association had received exactly $0 in compliance fees over the same period. The money had simply vanished. "Melody," I called out, "come look at this." She set down her red grading pen and joined me at the table, her teacher instincts immediately recognizing the organized chaos of my investigation. "She's been embezzling," I said, pointing to the discrepancies. Every single compliance fee went straight into her personal pocket. But the rabbit hole went deeper. Remember how I mentioned Brenda owed $3,200 in unpaid HOA assessments? That was just the beginning. A little more digging revealed she owed $47,000 in credit card debt. Her mortgage was 3 months behind, and her husband's business had filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago. Brenda wasn't just a neighborhood bully. She was a desperate woman using fake authority to fund her failing finances. Then I found the smoking gun. The original HOA charter from 1987, buried in a stack of incorporation documents. According to state law, our Homeowners Association was required to conduct an annual financial audit by a certified public accountant. The charter made it mandatory, not optional. I flipped through 4 years of financial records. No audits, not one. Knowledge nugget number 4. Most state laws require HOAs to file annual reports with regulatory agencies, and many HOA charters mandate yearly financial audits. Missing audits can void the HOA's legal authority to collect fees or enforce rules. This wasn't just embezzlement, it was operating an illegal organization. I called Jenny Henderson, our Truth Squad member who worked at the county clerk's office. "Jenny, can you check something for me? When was the last time our HOA filed required state paperwork?" 20 minutes later, she called back with news that made me smile for the first time in weeks. "Rex, your HOA hasn't filed mandatory annual reports in 3 years. Technically, you guys aren't even a legal homeowners association anymore. The state dissolved your charter for non-compliance." Let me repeat that. Brenda had been collecting money and making threats on behalf of an organization that didn't legally exist. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces finally clicking into place. This wasn't just about my vegetable garden or her petty power trips. Brenda had created an elaborate scam, targeting families she thought wouldn't fight back military people who move frequently, working-class folks who keep their heads down, immigrants who might not understand their rights. She'd counted on victims paying up and moving away before anyone connected the dots. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. First to my JAG buddy Sarah, who nearly fell out of her chair laughing when I explained the situation. Second to the State Attorney General's Consumer Fraud Division. Third to investigative reporter Janet Walsh at Channel 7 News. "Mr. Hartwell," Janet said after I laid out the evidence, "this could be the biggest HOA fraud case in state history. Are you willing to go on record?" I looked out my kitchen window at the empty spot where my garden used to be, then at the stack of evidence covering my dining room table. "Ma'am," I said, "I'm ready to go to war." The next 72 hours felt like preparing for a major military operation, except instead of tanks and artillery, we were armed with spreadsheets and legal documents. Tuesday morning, my kitchen became command headquarters. Melody had pushed our table against the wall to create more workspace, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sounds of papers shuffling and phones ringing. The Truth Squad had grown to 15 families. Word spreads fast when people realize they've been scammed. My first call went to Colonel Sarah Martinez, my JAG buddy. I laid out everything. The embezzlement, the illegal organization, Brenda's fake authority, the destroyed property. "Rex, this is beautiful," Sarah said, and I could hear her taking notes. "You've got her on multiple felonies. Embezzlement over $10,000 becomes a federal crime. Filing false police reports is another felony. And if she's been using the Postal Service for her scam letters, that's mail fraud." She walked me through the legal framework. Citizens can file criminal complaints directly with the district attorney. Victims of fraud can recover triple damages under consumer protection laws. And here's the best part. Since the HOA was operating illegally, every fee they collected was theft. "How do we do this right?" I asked. "Overwhelming evidence, multiple witnesses, and perfect timing," Sarah replied. "Make it so airtight that prosecutors can't ignore it." While Sarah explained the legal strategy, Melody was coordinating our intelligence network. Her teacher organizational skills turned our dining room into mission control. She'd created a timeline of Brenda's scams, victim statements from each family, and a financial analysis showing exactly where the money went. Jenny Henderson arrived with a banker's box full of county records. "I pulled every document I could legally access," she said, setting the box on our counter. "HOA filings, property records, business licenses, court judgments, it's all here." Mike Johnson brought his receipt collection, every payment he'd made to Brenda over 2 years. Maria Garcia had photographs of her offensive holiday decorations. The Patels contributed recordings of Brenda's threats on their doorbell camera. But our secret weapon walked in Wednesday afternoon. Investigative reporter Janet Walsh from Channel 7 News. Janet was maybe 45 with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent years exposing corruption. She set up her laptop on our kitchen counter and started reviewing our evidence like a prosecutor preparing for trial. "This is incredible," she said, scrolling through financial documents. "I've covered municipal corruption for 15 years and I've never seen fraud this blatant." She didn't even try to hide it. Janet explained how media exposure works. Local story first, then state attention if it gets traction. Social media amplification through community groups. Pressure on law enforcement to act quickly. "The key is timing," she said. "We need to coordinate the story release with your formal complaint to maximize impact." That evening, we held our final Truth Squad meeting. 17 families packed into our living room, the energy crackling with anticipation. Children played in the backyard while adults planned Brenda's downfall. I stood up, feeling like I was addressing troops before a mission. "Here's how this works. Tomorrow we file criminal complaints with the district attorney and the state fraud division. Janet releases her investigation Friday morning. Saturday, we present everything at the monthly HOA meeting." Knowledge nugget number 5. Consumer protection laws in most states allow fraud victims to recover triple damages plus attorney fees, and embezzlement over $10,000 triggers federal prosecution. Always file complaints with multiple agencies to maximize pressure. Maria raised her hand, still the teacher, even in rebellion mode. "What if she tries to run, destroys evidence?" "She won't," I said. "Brenda's ego won't let her believe she's really in trouble. She thinks she's smarter than all of us." Mike nodded. "Plus, we've got copies of everything. Even if she destroys her records, we have enough evidence to convict." Wednesday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the families Brenda had intimidated, all the money she'd stolen, all the stress she'd caused. The sound of our ceiling fan mixed with Melody's steady breathing as I planned the final confrontation. Thursday morning, we executed Phase 1. Sarah Martinez filed criminal complaints on behalf of all victims with the district attorney's office. Jenny submitted our evidence to the state fraud division. I hand-delivered a formal complaint to the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Mail fraud makes it federal. By noon, Brenda had 3 different law enforcement agencies opening investigations into her activities. That afternoon, Janet Walsh called with news that made me smile. Channel 7 is running the story tomorrow at 6 p.m. But here's the bonus: I pitched it to the network level. This could go national. Friday evening, I sat in my recliner watching Janet's investigative report on Channel 7. The segment was titled HOA Scam, Fake Authority, Real Theft. They interviewed 5 families, showed Brenda's fake documents, and explained exactly how the fraud worked. The story ended with Janet standing in front of Brenda's house. The Willowbrook Estates HOA meeting is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Residents say they're demanding answers, accountability, and their money back. Saturday morning, I put on my best shirt and tie. Time to finish what Brenda started. Friday night's news report hit Brenda like a tactical missile strike. By Saturday morning, she was in full panic mode. I was in my garage, organizing tools and trying to stay calm before the big confrontation, when my phone started buzzing with Truth Squad updates. The smell of motor oil and sawdust helped keep me grounded while the neighborhood exploded with drama. "She's at the Kowalski's house," Mike texted, screaming at Bob about canceling the HOA meeting. "Just saw her at Maria's front door," came another message. Maria slammed it in her face. But Brenda's most desperate move came at 10 a.m. when she showed up on my doorstep with two guys in cheap security uniforms. One looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The other kept checking his phone like he was timing his escape. "Mr. Hartwell," Brenda announced, her voice shaking with barely controlled hysteria, "you're banned from today's HOA meeting. These gentlemen will ensure you don't disrupt our community proceedings." I stepped onto my porch, noting how the taller security guard took an involuntary step backward. Military bearing has a way of making people reassess their situation. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "on what authority are you banning homeowners from a community meeting?" "I'm the Architectural Review Committee chairwoman," she snapped. "I have full authority to maintain order." The shorter security guard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ma'am, we can't actually prevent someone from attending a public meeting. That's illegal." Brenda whirled on him like a rabid dog. "I'm paying you to do your job." "Ma'am," the taller guard said, "our job is to observe and report. We're not law enforcement. We can't detain anyone or prevent them from going anywhere." That's when Brenda made her fatal mistake. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need police immediately," she said, loud enough for half the street to hear. "There's a dangerous veteran threatening me and my security team. He's making terrorist threats, and I fear for my safety." I stood perfectly still, hands visible, making no threatening moves whatsoever. The security guards looked mortified. My neighbor, Mrs. Olivia, was watering her flowers 20 feet away, witnessing the whole performance. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up. Officer Martinez stepped out, the same lieutenant who'd served under me in Afghanistan. He approached with professional neutrality, but I caught the slight recognition in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said to Brenda, "what's the situation here?" Brenda launched into a hysterical account of my aggressive behavior and intimidation tactics. Then she claimed I'd threatened her physically, accused me of organizing a conspiracy against law-abiding citizens, and demanded my immediate arrest for harassment and stalking. Martinez listened without expression, then turned to me. "Sir, can you tell me what happened here?" "Officer Martinez," I said, maintaining proper military courtesy, "these individuals came to my property claiming authority to ban me from a community meeting. I asked on what legal basis. No threats were made. No aggressive behavior occurred. Mrs. Olivia witnessed the entire interaction." Martinez glanced at Mrs. Olivia, who nodded vigorously. "The lady was yelling," she called out in her accented English. "The man was very polite." Then Martinez did something beautiful. He pulled out his notebook and started asking Brenda detailed questions about her claims. What specific threats were made? What exact words did I use? When did these alleged incidents occur? Under questioning, Brenda's story fell apart faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. She couldn't provide specifics, her timeline kept changing, and her accusations became increasingly wild. "He's been stalking me for weeks," she finally declared, "organizing his military buddies to intimidate me. It's a conspiracy." Martinez closed his notebook. "Ma'am, filing false police reports is a crime. Are you sure you want to maintain these accusations?" Brenda's face went white. She looked at the security guards, who were already backing toward their car. She looked at me, standing calmly with my hands at my sides. She looked at Mrs. Olivia, who was now openly recording with her phone. I want him arrested," she whispered, but all the fight had gone out of her voice. "Based on what I've observed and the witness statements," Martinez said professionally, "there's no evidence of any crime being committed by Mr. Hartwell. However, I am concerned about the nature of your 911 call." That's when Brenda realized she'd walked into her own trap. Filing false police reports is a felony. Making false accusations against a veteran could trigger federal hate crime investigations. And she'd done it all in front of witnesses and cameras. "The HOA meeting is in 4 hours," I said quietly. "See you there, Miss Kensington." As she drove away in her white Lexus, tires squealing, I knew we'd reached the point of no return. Desperate enemies make fatal mistakes, and Brenda had just made hers. Martinez approached me as the crowd dispersed. "Good to see you again, sir," he said quietly. "Word of advice, document everything that happened here. Something tells me this isn't over." By noon Saturday, Brenda had officially lost her mind. I was getting dressed for the HOA meeting when Mike Johnson called with an emergency update. "Rex, you need to see this," he said, his voice tight with anger. "She's at the community center with a locksmith." I drove over to find Brenda directing a confused-looking locksmith to change the locks on the community center doors. She was waving around some official-looking papers and claiming emergency authority to secure the building against terrorist infiltration. The locksmith, a weathered guy in his 60s, kept shaking his head. "Lady, I can't change locks on a public building without proper authorization from the property management company. This makes no sense." "I am the proper authority!" Brenda screamed, her carefully maintained suburban facade finally cracking completely. "I'm protecting this community from dangerous criminals." A small crowd had gathered to watch the meltdown. Jenny Henderson was recording everything on her phone. Maria Garcia was taking notes like she was documenting student behavior. The Patels had brought folding chairs, treating it like free entertainment. That's when things got really interesting. A white van pulled up and 3 guys in matching polo shirts got out. Private Security Solutions, their shirts read. Brenda had apparently hired actual security for the HOA meeting. The head security guy approached Brenda with the resigned expression of someone who'd dealt with difficult clients before. "Ma'am, we need to clarify our role here. You said this was crowd control for a community event?" "These people are trying to disrupt our legal proceedings," Brenda declared, gesturing at our growing crowd of residents. "I need them removed from the premises." The security supervisor looked around at the crowd, elderly Mrs. Olivia with her knitting bag, Mike Johnson holding his toddler, families with kids in folding chairs. "Ma'am, this looks like neighbors gathering for a community meeting. We can't remove people from public property for no reason." "I'm chairwoman of the Architectural Review Committee," Brenda shrieked. "I have full legal authority." That's when Jenny Henderson spoke up from the crowd. "Actually, Ms. Kensington, I checked the county records. Your HOA lost its legal charter 3 years ago for failing to file required paperwork. You have no authority whatsoever." The security supervisor's eyebrows went up. "Ma'am, if there's no legal HOA, then who's paying our fee?" Brenda's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. You just do your job and keep these troublemakers away from me." But her hired security was already backing away. Professional security companies don't work for clients who might be committing fraud. At 1:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting, Brenda made her final desperate play. She called the fire department claiming the community center was over capacity and presented a safety hazard. Fire Chief Rodriguez arrived with 2 trucks, sirens wailing, expecting a real emergency. Instead, he found about 40 residents sitting peacefully in a room designed for 200 people. "Ma'am," he said to Brenda after surveying the situation, "this building is nowhere near capacity. Who reported the emergency?" "These people are violating fire safety codes," Brenda insisted. "They're blocking exits and creating dangerous conditions." Chief Rodriguez looked around at families sitting in orderly rows, kids coloring quietly, elderly residents knitting. "Ma'am, filing false emergency reports is a serious crime. Are you sure you want to maintain this claim?" By now, Brenda was completely unhinged. Her expensive haircut was disheveled, her yoga outfit was wrinkled from stress sweat, and her voice had reached frequencies that probably bothered neighborhood dogs. "Everyone's against me," she screamed at the fire chief. "The police, the security, the locksmith, you're all part of their conspiracy." That's when Channel 7's news van pulled up. Reporter Janet Walsh stepped out with her camera crew, drawn by the fire trucks and the crowd. She took one look at the scene and started recording immediately. This is Janet Walsh reporting live from Willowbrook Estates, where what was supposed to be a routine HOA meeting has turned into something much more dramatic. The camera captured Brenda's final meltdown perfectly. She saw the news crew and completely lost it, screaming about fake news and military conspiracies, while fire trucks and confused locksmith watched in amazement. "Turn that camera off," she shrieked, actually trying to grab the camera from the operator. "This is private property. You're trespassing." Chief Rodriguez gently restrained her. "Ma'am, this is a public building and these are credentialed reporters. You need to calm down before this gets worse." but Brenda was beyond reason. She started making wild accusations about everyone present. The fire department was corrupt. The news crew was biased. The residents were terrorist sympathizers. At exactly 2 p.m., I stood up in the community center and called the meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to today's emergency HOA meeting. I believe we have some important financial matters to discuss. Outside, fire trucks were leaving. The locksmith was packing up his tools, and Brenda Kensington was sitting in her white Lexus, making frantic phone calls to lawyers who probably weren't taking her seriously anymore. The community center was packed beyond anything I'd seen in my 18 months at Willowbrook Estates. Every seat was filled, people lined the walls, and kids sat cross-legged on the floor in front. The smell of coffee from the back table mixed with nervous energy and anticipation. Channel 7's camera crew had set up in the corner, their equipment humming quietly. Janet Walsh sat in the front row with her notebook ready. Even some residents from neighboring developments had shown up after seeing the news coverage. I stood at the front podium, looking out at faces I'd come to know. Victims of Brenda's scam, neighbors who'd stayed silent too long, families ready for justice. Behind me, a projector screen displayed financial charts that Melody had prepared with her teacher's attention to detail. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying the command presence that 28 years of military service had taught me. We're here to discuss some serious irregularities in our HOA's financial management. Brenda burst through the back doors at that exact moment, flanked by a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit who was obviously her attorney. She marched down the center aisle like she owned the place, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor with military precision, ironic, considering what was about to happen. "This meeting is illegal," she announced loud enough to be heard in the parking lot. "I'm the chairwoman of the Architectural Review Committee, and I did not authorize this gathering." The room fell silent. I clicked my remote, and the first slide appeared on the screen. Willowbrook Estates HOA, legal status, dissolved, 2021. "Ms. Kensington," I said calmly, "according to state records, our HOA lost its legal charter 3 years ago due to failure to file required annual reports. You can't be chairwoman of a committee that doesn't exist in an organization that isn't legal." Her attorney tugged on her sleeve, whispering urgently, but Brenda shook him off. "That's lies! Military propaganda!" she screamed. "I have full legal authority to manage this community." I clicked to the next slide, a breakdown of collected compliance fees over 2 years, $23,847 in total. Then the next slide, HOA bank deposits for the same period, $0. "Where did the money go, Ms. Kensington?" The room erupted. Voices rose as residents compared notes, realizing the scope of the fraud. Children looked confused as their parents grew angry. The news camera captured every moment. Brenda's attorney was now actively trying to drag her toward the exit, but she planted her feet and doubled down. "Those people owed legitimate fines," she shrieked, pointing at the Truth Squad families. "Military deadbeats, immigrant troublemakers, teachers who think they're above the rules." The racist undertones that had always lurked beneath her suburban facade were now out in the open, recorded for posterity by Channel 7's cameras. That's when Mike Johnson stood up. "I paid you $300 because you said my work van violated parking rules. I'm a Navy veteran. I earned the right to park in my own driveway." Maria Garcia rose next. $400 for holiday decorations that celebrated my heritage. My family has lived in America for 3 generations. One by one, families stood up and shared their stories, the room filled with voices that had been silenced by intimidation and fake authority. But Brenda wasn't finished. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "I protect property values. I maintain standards. These people are destroying our neighborhood." That's when the back doors opened again, and Lieutenant Martinez walked in with his partner. My heart jumped. This wasn't part of the plan. Martinez approached the podium with official purpose, his face serious but professional. Brenda saw the officers and completely lost her mind. "Finally, arrest him. Arrest all of them. They're threatening me. It's a military conspiracy." Martinez ignored her and walked directly to me. The room fell dead silent. Even the kids stopped fidgeting. Then Martinez did something that changed everything. He stopped 3 feet from me, came to perfect military attention, and in a voice that carried across the packed room said, "Yes, General. How can I assist you today, sir?" The gasp that went up from the crowd could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Brenda's face went white, then green, then something approaching purple. "General?" someone whispered from the audience. "Brigadier General Rex Hartwell, retired," Martinez announced to the room. "Served with honor in Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the finest officers I ever had the privilege to serve under." Brenda's attorney was now physically pulling her toward the exit, but she broke free one last time. "I don't care if he's a general," she screamed. "He's destroying our community. Someone has to stop him." Martinez turned to face her with the cold professionalism of a cop who'd had enough. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for embezzlement, filing false police reports, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As the handcuffs clicked around Brenda's wrists, the room erupted in applause. Children clapped without understanding why. Adults wiped away tears of relief and vindication. I stepped back to the microphone for my final words. "In the military, we protect people from bullies. That duty doesn't end when you hang up the uniform." 6 months later, I'm sitting in my rebuilt garden, watching tomatoes ripen in the afternoon sun. The smell of fresh basil mixes with the sound of children playing in the Garcia's backyard next door. It's the kind of peace I thought I'd never find after 28 years of military service. Brenda Kensington pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy trial. 18 months in minimum security prison, full restitution to all victims, plus punitive damages that totaled $127,000. Her fancy house went up for sale within a month, and rumor has it she moved in with her mother in another state. Some battles end with surrender, and Brenda finally recognized when she was beaten. The legal aftermath was swift and satisfying. Every family got their money back with interest. The State Attorney General's office used our case as a model for HOA fraud prosecution statewide. 3 other communities came forward with similar scams, all inspired by our story going viral on social media. But the real victory happened right here in Willowbrook Estates. The neighbors elected me HOA president by unanimous vote apparently. Having an actual leader makes a difference. We rewrote the bylaws with transparency requirements, financial oversight, and anti-harassment protections that would make any military lawyer proud. Our monthly meetings now happen in Mike Johnson's backyard, with Melody's homemade cookies and coffee that doesn't taste like motor oil. We actually discuss community improvement instead of manufactured crises. Property values have increased 8% since Brenda's removal. Turns out people prefer living in neighborhoods without toxic dictators. The community garden where this all started has become our neighborhood's crown jewel. 12 families contribute vegetables, herbs, and flowers. Mrs. Olivia teaches traditional Chinese gardening techniques to anyone willing to learn. The Patel kids built a compost system for their Eagle Scout project. Even some of Brenda's former allies have joined in, quietly apologizing for staying silent too long. But the story doesn't end with just our neighborhood. The media attention opened doors I never expected. Melody and I started something we call the Hartwell Community Foundation, a nonprofit that helps military families navigate civilian bureaucracy and provides legal support for HOA harassment victims. In our first year, we've raised over $180,000 through speaking engagements, online donations, and corporate sponsors who saw the viral videos. The foundation has helped 43 families across 7 states fight similar scams. We've created a network of volunteer attorneys, most of them military veterans who understand the mission: protect those who can't protect themselves. The scholarship program has been our greatest success. 28 military children received college funding this year, named the Victory Garden Scholarships, in honor of the tomatoes that started this whole fight. Each recipient gets mentorship from local veterans and ongoing support through graduation. Lieutenant Martinez, who became the hero of 1,000 social media shares, got promoted to captain partly due to his professional handling of our situation. He stops by occasionally for coffee and war stories, both the overseas kind and the suburban variety. Most importantly, Melody and I found something we didn't know we were missing: purpose beyond ourselves. Military service teaches you to protect and serve, but retirement can leave veterans feeling useless. Fighting neighborhood bullies turned out to be just another way to serve our community. Last week, I got a call from a retired Air Force colonel in Phoenix whose HOA was pulling the same scam Brenda ran. "General Hartwell," he said, "we need your help. These people have no idea what they've started." Melody overheard and started laughing. "Looks like we're becoming professional HOA Karen hunters," she said. "Maybe we are. But if that's how we spend our retirement helping families stand up to petty tyrants and teaching bullies that actions have consequences, I can think of worse missions." The garden is thriving, the neighborhood is peaceful, and justice has been served with a side of homegrown tomatoes. Not bad for a day's work. Your turn to fight back. Drop a comment below and share your own HOA nightmare story. You'll be amazed how many people are dealing with the same problems. And if this story helped you realize you're not powerless against neighborhood bullies, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories about everyday heroes beating the system, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Remember, you have more power than you think when you stand together. Sometimes it just takes one person willing to fight back to change everything.